story you are about to hear is not meant for the faint of heart. It is not a folk tale, nor an invention of the imagination, but a truth buried so deep in whispers that even families who knew of it refused to ever speak the words aloud. It begins before birth itself, in a time when fate and flesh intertwined in ways that should have been impossible. Imagine a child entering the world, not alone, but carrying within him the silence of another life, a life swallowed, absorbed, consumed before breath ever reached the lungs. Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit subscribe and tap the bell icon before the story pulls you in too deep. It was a cold autumn in a forgotten European village when the boy was born. The midwife, bent with age and superstition, claimed she had never felt a womb so restless, so crowded. And yet, when the time came, only one infant emerged. He was frail, his skin pale as paper, his limbs twitching unnaturally. The mother wept in relief, but her cry soon shifted into silence when she noticed the look in the midwife's eyes. There had been more inside her. There had been another heartbeat once, faint, competing, and now it was gone. As the boy grew, his strangeness only deepened. He was plagued by fevers no physician could name, his belly sometimes swelling in grotesque shapes as if something inside was fighting to push free. He would complain of strange dreams, visions of a brother he never met, a shadowed figure that stood always at his side, whispering through the dark. In the narrow alleys of the village, rumors spread quickly. The people began to call him cursed. Some claimed he had eaten his own twin in the womb, taking its life to strengthen his own. Others muttered that such acts were punishments from God, evidence of sins carried through bloodlines no one dared to discuss. But medicine eventually offered its own explanation on a colder and somehow more horrifying. Within his body, beneath his ribs, physicians found remnants, not scars, not infections, but bone, teeth, a fragment of hair embedded in tissue, proof that another life had begun within the womb and been consumed by him before the world ever saw its face. This was no longer a village rumor. It was a truth carved into the boy's body itself. The discovery of bones and teeth inside the boy's body should have been the end of the mystery. But instead, it became the beginning. The physicians, stiff in their black coats and polished shoes, debated in hushed voices. Some called it a rare medical condition, fetus in fetu, a scientific explanation for the grotesque, yet others whispered what the villagers already feared. This was not a quirk of biology, but a crime of nature. He had devoured his brother before either of them had the chance to take a breath. The boy's mother became a ghost of herself. Each time she held him, she thought she felt another heartbeat in his chest, one that did not belong to him. She told the priest in confession that she heard crying at night, crying not from her child, but from inside the walls of the house. She swore the cries were smaller, weaker, like a baby's voice that had been drowned before it could be heard. The priest told her to pray harder, but prayer only seemed to make the sounds grow louder. The boy, too, began to feel haunted by something within him. When he spoke, he sometimes slipped into words no one had taught him. When he cried, he often looked around the room, not at his mother, not at the midwife, but at the empty space beside him, as if someone stood there, waiting. The villagers watched, and as they watched, their fear grew. It did not help that the child's body continued to betray secrets. On one occasion, when a fever nearly killed him, a surgeon was called to cut into the swelling near his stomach. What spilled forth was not infection or pus, but a clump of hair matted together, and a small malformed tooth lodged deep in the tissue. The room froze. The midwife fainted. The surgeon turned pale and whispered that such things were not meant to be seen. From then on, he was no longer seen as just cursed. He was something worse, marked. The villagers refused to let their children play near him. Mothers crossed themselves when he passed. Old men spat on the ground, muttering that one life had eaten another, and that such hunger could never be satisfied. And all the while, the boy grew older, carrying inside him the remnants of the one he had consumed, and perhaps the spirit of a brother who refused to stay silent. By the time the boy reached his 10th year, the whispers had turned into open suspicion. The village treated him less like a child, and more like a reminder of something that should never have existed. The old women shook their heads when he passed, whispering about the eater under their breath. Men avoided his gaze, unsettled by the sharpness of his eyes, as though he had inherited not one soul, but two. The boy began to understand, though no one spoke the truth to him. He would ask his mother why people stared, why children crossed the road rather than walk near him. She would turn her face away, hands trembling as though holding back words she could never allow herself to speak. He grew up with half-answers, riddles, and silence. But silence often speaks louder than any confession. In the evenings he began to talk to himself, or so the villagers believed. They would see him crouched near the old stone wall, lips moving, his expression grave, as if listening to someone who spoke back. Once, a shepherd claimed he heard two voices coming from the boy's mouth at the same time, one deep, one faint, both overlapping like a chant. Nobody believed him at first, but when another villager reported the same, fear became certainty. His sleep brought no peace. The mother confided to her priest that she often found him thrashing at night, clutching his stomach as if fighting something from within. He woke with bite marks on his arms, small and sharp like those of an infant's teeth, though no one else lived in that room. When the priest inspected the marks, he paled and told her not to speak of it again. The church did not tolerate such things being whispered aloud. By his 12th birthday, the boy had changed. His body grew lean, but his hunger was monstrous. He ate twice the food of any other child, yet his eyes remained hollow, restless. When denied, he would gnash his teeth, muttering words no one could understand. Some swore they saw his reflection linger in mirrors after he had stepped away, a second figure faintly behind him. The villagers no longer asked whether he had eaten his brother in the womb. Instead, they wondered if the brother still lived inside him, waiting for the chance to come back out. By the time adolescence settled in, the boy's strangeness had grown into something the village could no longer ignore. He had become tall, his shoulders sharp, his frame wiry, but there was something wrong in the way he moved. His step seemed mismatched, as if two rhythms battled for control of his body. People said he walked as though another person's invisible hand guided him from within. His mother kept her distance, though she loved him. Love does not erase fear, and she feared the truth she had hidden for too long. She had heard the doctor's words when he delivered her son. There were two, now there is only one. But the boy's fits, his hunger, his strange mutterings suggested otherwise. Something of the second had never left. One night, a neighbor swore he saw the boy standing in the field, under a blood-red moon, shirtless, hands pressed to his stomach. He whispered in a tongue that was not his own. The neighbor claimed he saw the flesh of the boy's belly ripple, as though something pressed outward, straining against the skin from inside. He told no one for weeks, but when he finally spoke, the village believed him. Too many had already felt that same unease. Soon, the boy began to collect things. Bones from the forest, broken dolls, fragments of cloth with stains. He would not explain. He hid them under his bed, arranged as though they belonged to another body, a body he was trying to rebuild piece by piece. When his mother found the collection, she screamed, demanding to know why. His only answer was chilling in its simplicity. He needs them. The villagers whispered about the old word, chimerism, but even that could not explain what they saw, for chimeras were curiosities of nature, not monsters. And yet, when the boy passed, animals would scatter, dogs would bark wildly, and infants would cry as though sensing something no adult could see. On his 15th birthday, the priest refused to let him inside the church. He said that when the boy approached, the candles extinguished themselves, smoke curling into shapes that resembled a small hand. The congregation fled, leaving the boy outside in the cold night air, staring at the doors that would never open to him again. The question grew heavier with each passing year. Had he truly eaten his twin in the womb, or had he only carried him forward into life, sharing one body between two souls? By the time he reached manhood, the boy, now a young man, had become an unsolvable riddle to those around him. His face had hardened into sharp, uneven angles, as though molded by two conflicting hands. One eye seemed always slightly larger than the other, the jawline never symmetrical, and when he smiled, it was crooked in a way that unsettled even his closest kin. People said he bore not just his own face, but fragments of another that were never meant to exist outside the womb. The hunger within him never ceased. He ate like no other man of his age, consuming meals enough for two, yet his body remained lean, as if something else was taking its share before he could keep it. Some nights, his mother would hear him whisper in his sleep, not words in any known language, but the low, guttural sounds of a child's cry, repeating endlessly until morning. She stopped waking him after a time. To hear it, she admitted, was worse than silence. Strange phenomena surrounded him. On more than one occasion, visitors to the house swore they heard two voices answer when they called his name, his own and another, fainter, softer, but undeniably there. Once, while helping to repair a broken fence, a neighbor noticed the young man's reflection in the pond water. The reflection did not mimic him perfectly. Instead, it looked back with a different expression, its mouth opening when his stayed closed. The neighbor fled and never spoke to him again. The church called for an exorcism, certain that what dwelled inside him was no brother, but something darker, something parasitic. But when the priest attempted to drive it out, the candles snuffed, the crucifix split down the center, and the young man laughed with a voice that did not belong to him. They abandoned the ritual, terrified. The whispers of the village began to turn into fear-fueled action. Some claimed the young man was cursed, hers that he was chosen, bearing the living remains of his devoured twin. They debated what to do, but none dared approach him directly. His gaze had become too heavy, too knowing. as though he carried memories from a life that had never been lived. And yet, beneath all of it, one question lingered. Was the brother gone? Or had he been waiting, biding his time to be born again through the body of the survivor? By the 6th stage of his life, the young man was no longer seen as merely strange. He was feared. Neighbors avoided his path. Mothers clutched their children closer, and whispers spread that the soil itself rejected him. Crops near his home withered without explanation, and cattle grew restless when he passed. To the villagers, this was not coincidence. It was the mark of something unnatural, the presence of 2 souls uneasily bound within one fragile body. But the truth was far more disturbing. He began to speak of memories that could not be his own. When questioned about family events, he recalled moments he could not possibly have witnessed, yet he described them in detail that left his kin trembling. He spoke of a childhood he never lived, of toys broken in corners no one remembered, of lullabies sung to a child that had never breathed. He claimed he remembered the sound of his mother's heartbeat from the inside, twice. Most unnerving of all was his growing belief that he was not alone inside himself. He confessed in private moments that he could feel another presence pressing against him, breathing when he did, pulling at his thoughts. He described sudden cravings for things he hated, laughter that burst from his lips without reason, and a constant tug in his chest as though someone else shared his heart. His mother wept when he asked her if it was possible to be born twice. Then came the incident that could no longer be ignored. One night, during a violent storm, the family awoke to a sound like scratching inside the walls. They thought it was rats, but when they followed the noise, they found him standing motionless in the dark hallway, his fingernails bloody, the plaster torn open. He stared at the jagged hole he'd made and whispered, "He's in there. He wants out." The following days brought even more terror. His reflection in mirrors lingered a moment long, clearer than his body, sometimes smiling when he did not. In sleep, his chest moved as though 2 sets of lungs were breathing in opposition. His voice cracked and split mid-sentence, layered with another tone that was neither entirely male nor entirely human. By now, the villagers refused to come near. His home became a fortress of silence. But silence is not safety. The second presence within him was no longer content to remain hidden. It was pushing forward, clawing, demanding to finish what had begun in the womb. In the final years of his life, the story reached its most unbearable climax. By then, he had become more specter than man, retreating into dark rooms where sunlight never touched. The villagers, terrified of what he might become, whispered about curses, demons, or sins older than memory. But inside that house, the truth was unraveling in ways no scripture or superstition could contain. His body began to betray him. Doctors who dared to examine him whispered about strange masses inside his abdomen, twisted remnants of bone, hair, and teeth embedded deep within. They spoke of a malformed twin absorbed before birth, a parasitic sibling that never drew breath, but left behind fragments that refused to die. But those who knew him, who listened in the midnight hours, swore this was no lifeless mass. It was a consciousness, a voice, a hunger. He would sit in silence for hours, clutching his stomach as though in conversation with something inside. At times, he burst into violent arguments with no one visible, cursing, shouting, begging for quiet. Other times, he laughed uncontrollably, as though sharing a private joke with a phantom. Family members reported seeing his body convulse in unnatural rhythms, as though something within was trying to crawl out through his skin. And then, one night, it did. During his final fever, he screamed louder than the storm outside. The walls shook with the sound. Neighbors swore they saw shadows move behind his windows, shadows that did not match his frame. When the silence finally came, they found him lifeless in bed, his mouth torn at the corners, his eyes wide with terror. The doctors claimed he died of internal rupture, but among the townspeople, a darker belief spread that the twin he devoured before birth had at last taken him back. They buried him in a grave apart from the others, no stone to mark his name. The town went silent, and over time the story faded. But the house where he lived still stands, rotting, its walls said to whisper at night. Some who wander too close swear they hear scratching inside, faint but persistent, as if someone or something still wants out. Perhaps he was cursed. Perhaps he was only a victim of nature's cruel design. But one truth remains certain. He was never alone. Not in the womb. Not in life. And perhaps not in death.